Imagine being told every day that you must look perfect, but not too perfect. In the Soviet Union, beauty wasn't a personal matter. It was a matter of politics, control, and national image. Your face could be seen as a badge of loyalty, your hair a sign of morality, your smile a measure of your worth. The wrong shade of lipstick, the wrong hemline, or even an unkempt appearance could bring gossip, suspicion, and sometimes consequences far harsher than anyone in the West could imagine. This was a world where every strand of hair and every stitch of clothing could be judged not just by neighbors, but by the state itself. Beauty was a double-edged sword. Wielded carefully, it could open doors, but handled carelessly, it could shut them forever. From the very beginning of the Soviet era, the state sought to craft its own version of the ideal woman. She was slim but not fragile, strong but not masculine, youthful yet mature enough to bear responsibility, natural yet flawless. She was to embody the values of hard work, discipline, and loyalty, while also representing a shining example of health and vitality for the socialist dream. The paradox was that women were encouraged to avoid bourgeois vanity, yet were expected to be presentable at all times. Too much effort was suspicious, but too little was shameful. On the posters and propaganda films, Soviet women gleamed with vitality. Glossy hair neatly styled, skin glowing, teeth perfectly white. Their cheeks were rosy not from makeup, but from the imagined freshness of outdoor labor. These images became the standard, an unreachable benchmark for the vast majority who lived far from the polished world of state propaganda. For ordinary women, the reality was nothing like the posters. Cosmetics were scarce, often crude in quality, and rarely worth the cost. Lipstick might be grainy and smell of chemicals. Creams could leave the skin greasy, and perfume was a luxury known only to those with connections. Clothing came in state-approved designs, practical, modest, and almost identical. There were no racks of seasonal trends, no variety of cuts and colors. A fashionable Western silhouette was not only hard to find, but also socially dangerous. Women improvised with whatever they could find. Beet juice became a natural blush and lipstick. Potato slices were used to reduce under-eye circles. Old soap was shaved into powders to make face masks. Dresses were sewn from curtains. Coats were mended until the fabric thinned. And hairstyles were maintained with homemade curlers. For many, these were not playful acts of creativity, but acts of necessity, carried out in the quiet hours after work or before dawn. The pressure was even sharper in certain professions. Jobs that put women in public view often had unspoken appearance requirements. Shop assistants, flight attendants, and office receptionists were chosen not only for their skills, but for their looks. A pleasant smile, clear skin, and neatly pressed clothes could help you get hired. But the same features could also mark you as trying too hard in the eyes of a supervisor or coworker. A store clerk might be told she looked too glamorous for a socialist worker, while another might be chastised for appearing neglected. The balance was impossible to maintain. Even outside the workplace, appearance was policed through social judgment. The Soviet system thrived on mutual surveillance, and women's looks became another area where gossip could bloom into trouble. Too much blonde in your hair? That was Western influence. A skirt above the knee? Immoral behavior. Bright lipstick? Seeking male attention. In a society where neighbors could report each other for political disloyalty, the wrong impression could be dangerous. A single whisper in the wrong ear could affect your job, your social standing, or your marriage prospects. Beauty was not just about personal pride. It was tied directly to politics. The Soviet leadership promoted images of women as tireless workers and caring mothers, blending strength and modest femininity into one symbolic figure. In official photographs, flaws were edited away, faces brightened, and eyes made to sparkle. A woman who fit this image could become a symbol of national pride, featured in newspapers or posters. But being too noticeable could also make you a target. A particularly attractive woman could draw attention from high-ranking men, which might bring favors but also suspicion. Her life could change overnight, sometimes for the better, sometimes for the worse. The constant effort to meet these standards took a heavy toll. Girls learned from a young age that their appearance was under scrutiny. Teachers might pull them aside to correct posture or warn against improper hairstyles. Mothers would remind daughters to look neat for fear of social embarrassment. The message was clear. Your value is measured not just by your work, but by how well you fit the mold. The mental strain of living under such conditions was enormous. Women carried an unspoken list of rules in their heads. Be clean but not flashy, be attractive but not seductive, be confident but not proud. Every day was a balancing act with no clear winning side. As the years went on, some women tried to stop caring, telling themselves that beauty was a trap. But society would not let them forget. A colleague might comment on their tired eyes. A relative might suggest a new hairstyle to brighten their look. Strangers in the market might raise an eyebrow at their clothes. The pressure never disappeared. It was in the air, as constant as the slogans on the walls. By the end of this first chapter, the contradiction is clear. The Soviet ideal of beauty was a mirror that could never truly reflect reality. It was a dream crafted in the offices of propagandists and printed in glossy magazines, yet lived out in cramped kitchens, cold apartments, and crowded workplaces. It was a game women could never truly win, because the rules were written to ensure they stayed just out of reach. But the true danger of beauty in the Soviet Union was not just failing to meet the standard. It was what could happen when you succeeded. And that's where the Rayal story begins. Some women learned to navigate the sharp edges of Soviet beauty standards not by resisting them, but by turning them into tools of survival. In a system where a well-placed smile or a carefully chosen dress could mean better treatment, certain women became masters of calculated presentation. A clerk who caught the approving eye of her manager might find herself assigned to the perfume counter instead of hauling boxes in the stockroom. A secretary whose neat hair and tasteful lipstick fit the ideal could be trusted with more prestigious tasks. Yet every advantage came with risk. Favor gained through appearance could vanish overnight if a superior felt threatened, if coworkers whispered jealousy, or someone in authority decided the attention was inappropriate. For the privileged few connected to party officials, the rules bent in ways the rest of the country could only imagine. While the official message urged modesty and disdain for Western vanity, the wives and mistresses of powerful men wore imported French perfumes, silk dresses, and Italian shoes. They visited private salons, had access to rare cosmetics, and wore their hair in styles copied from European magazines. Their lives were hidden behind closed doors and guarded compounds, away from the ration lines and empty store shelves. The double standard was obvious to those who caught glimpses of it. But speaking about it openly was unthinkable. Ordinary women knew they could never match this level of refinement, yet they were judged by standards shaped by it. The state's watchful eyes did not ignore beauty. The KGB, ever alert to perceived threats, kept informal track of women whose appearance stood out too much. Foreign-inspired hairstyles or unusual clothes might lead to a quiet conversation in an office with no windows. Women who worked near foreign diplomats were monitored, their social lives quietly investigated. A well-dressed woman in the wrong company might be accused of being a courier, an informant, or worse. Even small indulgences, an imported scarf, a shade of lipstick not found in local shops, could raise suspicions about how it was obtained and who provided it. In the countryside, beauty had different rules. A healthy glow from working outdoors, strong arms from farm labor, and thick braids were marks of respect. Their practicality shaped appearance. Dresses were simple, makeup rare, and hairstyles functional. But when young women move from rural areas to cities, they often face a harsh transition. City women move with a polished confidence, their clothes more tailored, their nails shaped, their speech refined. Rural newcomers could be treated as unsophisticated or out of touch, their natural beauty dismissed in favor of urban sleekness. The divide created quiet resentment and insecurity that linger for years. Marriage, too, was entwined with beauty in ways that weighed heavily on women. A well-kept appearance was seen as a duty, not only to oneself but to one's family. Parents encouraged daughters to look their best to secure a good husband, reinforcing the belief that a woman's future depended on how she presented herself. Men were also judged, but their status, job, and connections carried more weight than their looks. This uneven standard often strained relationships. A wife who failed to maintain the expected image could be criticized not only by her husband, but by his relatives, neighbors, and even coworkers. Yet beneath the surface of compliance, quiet rebellion thrived. In cramped apartments and locked bathrooms, women formed small circles of resistance. They shared sewing patterns for forbidden Western dress styles, traded smuggled magazines, and experimented with bold hairstyles away from the public eye. Some made their own high heels from wood and fabric. Others created perfume by mixing cologne with floral oils. These small acts were more than vanity. They were expressions of individuality in a society that sought to make everyone look the same. In these moments, beauty became an act of defiance. As the 1980s wore on and shortages grew worse, the state's grip on cultural life began to weaken. The flow of Western media through black markets and underground channels brought a flood of new styles, music, and attitudes. Young women began wearing brighter colors, sharper makeup, and bolder cuts. Older generations shook their heads, calling it foolish and dangerous, but the tide had turned. The official image of the modest, disciplined Soviet woman began to look outdated against the backdrop of changing times. Still, the scars left by decades of impossible beauty expectations did not fade easily. Women who had grown up under constant judgment often carried that voice with them for life, policing themselves long after the Soviet Union collapsed. They had learned to second-guess every choice, how a blouse fit, whether a lipstick shade was too daring, if a hairstyle might be misunderstood. For many, beauty had never been about self-expression. It had been about avoiding mistakes, staying within an invisible set of rules, and surviving social scrutiny. Looking back, it becomes clear that beauty in the Soviet Union was never truly about aesthetics. It was about control, about shaping women into symbols of the state, measuring them against a standard designed to be just out of reach. For some, it offered fleeting opportunities. For others, it brought unwanted attention or quiet suffering. But for all, it was a reminder that in this system, beauty was both a currency and a cage. Those who met the ideal could gain small freedoms, but they were never truly free. Those who failed to meet, it carried the weight of that failure everywhere they went. And in the end, the question was never simply, were you beautiful enough? But, did you look exactly as the state wanted you to? That was the standard, and it was one that no one, not even the most glamorous, could truly escape.